Hello, I'm Papa Biceps. You're watching the Thorin YouTube channel. And remember, don't fuck with Papito.
Mousesports are down to just 3 players remaining in their team, with the announcement that they are benching STYKO and chrisJ, and also their coach lmbt will be replaced. Now, there have been no replacements announced for any of these positions, no new players even on the horizon, reported, rumoured. In the post in which it was announced that these players would be benched, they were cited the issues towards the end of last year and then being unable to turn things around at the beginning of this year, implying their failure at the minor. So we'll go player by player, and as people know with the formula that I use to make these videos when they're roster moves, I'm not going to be able to do the second part of my roster move, which is when I ultimately determine whether it's the right move to replace someone. I look in isolation, but then I also look at who you're replacing them for. Obviously, I can't know who they're replacing them for, so I can't actually know yet holistically whether these are good moves. But in terms of the people being removed, I think I can find pretty good reasons as to why each might be removed and why I could agree with it. So we'll start out with the in-game leader, chrisJ, and I'll say immediately that you have to judge him as an in-game leader, and that if you do judge him as an in-game leader, I think it is actually quite fair for a team of Mousesports stature in terms of what you now expect of them in terms of results and what this core group of talent can accomplish. I think it's actually quite fair to remove chrisJ. Like, if you look, when his players were at their individual peaks, basically end of 2017 coming into the first sort of quarter or so of 2018, yes, they were a really good looking team. He seemed to be doing his job holding things together. But as pretty much all the players collectively took their slumps, fell off their peak form, doesn't seem as though he was able to adapt as an in-game leader around that. And particularly, he wasn't able, when Snacks came into the team, to integrate Snacks successfully, I wouldn't say. Obviously, each of these things, I'm not entirely putting the blame on him, but when you add it all together, a lot of responsibility's got to go to him. Likewise, when STYKO left to make room for Snacks, a good in-game leader would notice things like, we're having comm problems here, I'm going to have to task someone else with it, or I'm going to have to take a bigger task myself. There's also a reason why you wouldn't want certain moves like that to take place. Remember, chrisJ is a fairly inexperienced in-game leader. Had only done it for brief periods in the past, and then mainly with this core. And quite frankly, I don't think chrisJ was ever properly criticised as an in-game leader. If you contrast him with people who are only known as in-game leaders, Existence, Happy, NBK, FNS, DAPS, you go with any of these sorts of people, they get brutalised if their teams do badly. For some reason, chrisJ never seemed to get any criticism at all when his team would just outright fail. I mean, they lost a bazillion series. They were also a good team, certainly, but you know, there's got to be some that comes with that, right? Now, individually, he was a solid player. His numbers are terrible, but he's an in-game leader. And my problem is this. I think that chrisJ got to live off the fact that he used to be a much better individual player, and because of that, he's overqualified individually to be the in-game leader in terms of individual skill, and so as a result, he would out of nowhere have occasional games where he'd just completely carry, or within his job, he's in a team that didn't have all that many players who wanted to go aggro, he would be a guy who'd make those clutch entries late in a game. And those factors alone made people see that and go, right, well, it can't be his fault. Must be other people in the team. Now, funnily enough, having occasional huge games out of nowhere is very Carrigan-esque. That's actually what Carrigan used to do in FaZe before they got people like Olaf and Guardian. Going back even into Astralis, when he first joined them, when they were TSM/Dignitas, he used to have the occasional map where he'd drop 30 plus, just take over. But the whole point is, you looked at his stats overall, and they weren't monster stats. He wasn't having fragging like Glaive is now. And funnily enough, neither is chrisJ. Like, you go and look at his stats overall, yeah, they're not great at all. So that means that these occasional games actually make up for the games where he has like 9 kills. People ignore that though, they just look at the high, they don't look at the overall game. So my issue is this. Individually, I could have seen an argument for keeping him. It's just, I actually don't think it would make that much sense for either party. Like, in his particular case, he's probably better suited, I've always thought this about chrisJ as a player, as sort of like your third star, someone who can do a bit of the supportive aspects of the game, the team play component, but can also AWP when he needs to, and adds to your frag total, as it were, but isn't required to deliver 18 to 22 kills per game. You can have someone else do that. Now, he's obviously never really been in that position in his career much due to people who were ahead of him in the hierarchy not living up to the billing, or just having one person like Nico going ham. So I just think, for me, he either should be the star of a bigger team, or of a smaller team rather, like he should be the big star of a smaller team. An obvious one I've got to say right now, and people won't have thought of until this move happened, is Mousesports have just announced that Big have just announced that Smooya is stepping down. And it seems as though he's going to be exiting the team. And their only solution at the moment is to bring back Nex, who they say has just basically had to take time off for RSI. So even though for this major, I don't know that you can use him now, I think actually adding chrisJ wouldn't be a bad move there. He is actually a Smooya type of AWPer, but he's got more experience. He's a lot easier to get along with a person. I know he has a great amount of respect for GOB when he played under him in the past in Mousesports. And quite frankly, I think if you look at it now, Big now is kind of the level that Mousesports used to be at before. If anything, actually their result at Cologne was better than most of the old Mousesports results. So I even think it's the right sort of team level for him, assuming he wants to be that type of player. Or he can stay as an in-game leader, but he's got to go down a level. He's got to go down to the Imperials of the world. These sorts of teams, Valiants, these are probably the kind of teams he needs to go to if he wants to be an in-game leader. By the way, he could be very successful in those teams and bring him into the top 10. I could see that happening. Then again, though, he's had some fantastic talents to work with at Mousesports here, so I do want to kind of get a feel for what he's like without just raw talents to work with. So in terms of replacements, well, the most obvious one, and this isn't a very exciting move, because if you notice, whenever I used to say where I wanted Carrigan to go, the first place I always said was actually Mousesports or Team Liquid. Those are the really two big ones I wanted, because those give Carrigan all the pieces right now to potentially win if he really does have a big impact himself and can restructure the team. Now, obviously, Team Liquid option wasn't there, and also they're just too good a team at the moment. Mousesports option, it looked like it wasn't there because people assumed chrisJ wouldn't get removed. But if you're removing chrisJ, which they have, Carrigan's the most obvious person to get. I mean, you've got a whole bunch of star talents. We know how fantastic he is at working with those, from TSM, Astralis, into phase, into the next phase, into the phase after that. We know this guy knows what to do. Even with Envy, he made that team that was absolute garbage at least have a shot at making it to the major. They've got a pretty diverse group of players. These are players from different backgrounds. Again, he is one of the few people in history who's actually successfully brought together big names like that in phase, turned them into a world beater. Actually, this lineup, funnily enough, that he's got now, if he was to get the team in Mouse, is actually quite comparable to where FaZe was when he joined. They had a bunch of, some of these players are better, but they had some good individual players who just couldn't find peak form or weren't being used collectively well together. And then add in, obviously he famously plays secondary or role as well, if needed in his teams. Remember the first FaZe clan he joined? He was having big impact doing that when they needed someone along those lines. I think generally this is a slam dunk if you can get him here. In fact, the people right now who should be very nervous are the people behind North and Optic. If either of those teams plan to get Carrigan, the angle of but we're Danish as well, doesn't really matter to Carrigan. He's here to win majors, mate, and he knows you can do it without having people all from one country. So actually, I think if Mousesports play their cards right, and I hope this move implies that they've already reached out, I think this is the most obvious move for both parties. It's the best team Carrigan can get right now, and it's also the best in-game leader that Mousesports can get. So I hope that this is the replacement move. Now, in terms of the other player and the coach, okay, in terms of STYKO, he was actually fine on his return. He did seem like he got his head in the game. His numbers were fine for what you expected him to do in his role. And with that bevy of star players, he didn't need to do that much more. I thought he did his job. But you know what? If you're going to take out the in-game leader and you're going to take out the coach, and we're basically going to wipe the system entirely clean and start over, let's start fresh with the project again, just take these star players and make a new team around them, then I can get removing STYKO. He's clearly someone who had confidence issues. Some of the players in the team clearly don't necessarily want to play with him or have full respect for him. That's why they kicked him in the first place. So I think I personally would have kept him and let the new in-game leader test him out and see if he's actually bringing anything extra and if you can make him work. That would be my personal move. But fair enough, if you want to just go ahead and skip that process and just say, let's just start off with a new in-game leader, a new player with him and a new coach. Yeah, I get that. I kind of do. In terms of replacement, God only knows. I don't really even know, because presumably they'd probably be going for skill. People like Adren and Hobbit are already out of the equation. Bondic recently just joined the team. I don't really know who's available. Who are you going to get who's going to do... Because I'm thinking of someone has to be more on the supportive end of things, no matter who we get as an in-game leader. You're not really probably going to get North or Optic, plus it's tough to see where this one goes. This is a really tough one in my opinion. Unless you're going to get chrisJ from Optic, which I think would be a cool move, and then Carrigan, I can't really see what move you want to do here. Now, in terms of LMBT, I do think he helped the team. This is an example of someone who was a good coach and had an impact, but that doesn't mean he should be there forever. I think they had a big improvement from when he joined, just it was gradual. It wasn't like instantly massive. It was a gradual build up month by month by month. chrisJ becoming in-game leader was under his watch. And I think, quite frankly, I don't buy that chrisJ was just a genius overnight. I think LMBT helped him a lot to become a legit in-game leader and figure out how to use these particular players. He was able to bring together the different talents in this team. You can contrast, like I said, with teams like FaZe in the past. But remember, the FaZe clan I'm talking about before Karrigan joined wasn't making the playoffs ever. This team was already a consistent playoff team. I do think, though, that he hit a rut, whether that's just that he tried this style and it went to its limit and he needed better players like FaZe players, in which case you can't get them. Maybe people eventually just got tired of his style. They need something fresh. I can buy that. I don't think it's unreasonable. He seemed, again, kind of like chrisJ, kind of like STYKO. They are decent to good at their job, but are they the best? Not really. Now, can a team like Mouse get better players? That's the question. It seems like it in some of these cases. Coach one is a real tough one, though, because there's not that many coaches I even consider good anyway. And the ones that I have gotten to know, it's really tough to know how you can convince them to leave the team they're on or buy them out. Like, there's not a lot of people going to spend mega bucks for the coach. So that's the tough one. That actually does suggest they want to just start over. And I actually kind of like the fact they've taken the in-game leader and taken the coach and said, right, we've let you change players. We've given you some leeway on results. We've given you a lot of chance to compete. But ultimately, if you fail at the major objectives, including the major, you have to be removed. I mean, it's the same with football, NFL, NBA. If you actually have the talent and the pieces and they buy you the players and you have a good setup, if you fail over and over again in the key moments, eventually you do have to remove that guy. Even if you're having great regular seasons, if you fail every playoff game, eventually you have to take a chance with another person, right? So the thing about Mousesports is they were a quality team. They still have some quality players now. Their problem is, even at their best at the moment, they're going to be stuck at like 4th to 6th. They're just not going to crack that top 3. They're not going to win tournaments. And in fact, that's one of their problems. Their consistency and the quality of their players mean that they're good enough to be in contention and make some quarters and semis, but actually it's quite consistent that they're not going to beat the big teams. They don't have that crazy ceiling, and they're just quite frankly not going to win a tournament, except as a one-off crazy run. At this point, it would almost be comparable to North winning DreamHack Masters Stockholm. That was a little bit more exaggerated, but it'd have to be that kind of an inspired run where they just play at peak form in a way they haven't played over the last few months. So I think trying a new approach is fair enough. They gave this old lineup long enough. They gave the Snacks lineup long enough. They both had their cracks at a major cycle. They failed both, which is unacceptable for a team of this level. They had good results with this lineup towards the end, but even then they were like, most of the good results were like the placing was good, but you didn't beat anyone good, or you came close to winning a map against Astralis or another good team, but you didn't. So it was like a moral victory, which ultimately that only matters in the short term for people's confidence. They don't count as placements. You never count moral victories as placements. So quite frankly, when you look at this team, the major issue of Mouse is just how much they're willing to spend, because obviously if they have an international team like this, they have a massive amount of choices as to where they can go. They can get in NA players. They could get Tarek if they wanted to have him come in and play with Karrigan. They could get someone else for some of these other teams. You can have, in theory, anyone who can speak English at any acceptable level, as long as you can get the finances to secure them. So I hope they are getting a Karrigan type person, and then they're going to give him input as to who they get in the future. If you look at the people they kept, the 3 they kept, Oscar, Sonny and Rops, right? Oscar on paper is the best player they have at the moment. Problem obviously is he's quite old. Admittedly, he hasn't competed at the top level in terms of proper international Counter-Strike for very long, so maybe he still has a few more years in him motivation-wise, and I think skill-wise he could be good enough. But the fact that he's older and, quite frankly, isn't going to be going to a FaZe clan type team, a bigger team than Mouse, actually means that, yeah, you just want to keep him and ride him out and get all the talent that you can out of him now, get all the big performances and see how it goes for a few years. Also, there's not many other teams, quite frankly, could cope with him. Just a little bit of a difficult personality, not in terms of like saying things, but just someone you have to accommodate. Someone has to be comfortable for things to be good. Sonny is probably the best trade piece you have. I mean, he's the guy who's like already pretty good and has the potential to be very good very, very soon. Hence why teams like FaZe have contacted him. He was very good in the summer to the autumn, then he fell off hard. But still, you expect this is the player most likely to come back round to form and make you a very good team again. So you don't want to get rid of this guy. And he would be the person, quite frankly, every other team would be beating their door down to get from you. So keep him while you can. One day he might be in a FaZe clan or indeed an ENCE, depending on which side of the equation takes over fast enough. Then finally, you've got Rops. Now, of the 3, Rops is the one that would be the easiest to cut, in my opinion. He actually looks as though, to some degree, he's been figured out. His level's fallen off. He's consistent, actually, but consistently not that great a player. He's decent, but he's certainly no star player at the moment. But he represents the future. You got him for next to nothing. He's such a young guy. This is his first big team. There's so many reasons that he could improve and get better. So you don't want to give up that lottery ticket now and let someone else win the fucking Rops lottery and have him as a top 5 player in the world. Instead, what you want to do is this. You get a new in-game leader, you get a new coach, you let them take a look at him, they try something around, you've got another player position that you can use to change up the balance of the team, and you see if you can bring this guy back online. Because if you succeed, you've kept all your stars. So already you've got the engine, every part of the sports cars ready pretty much. You just now need the in-game leader and the support and the coach. Once you have that in place, this can be a very dangerous team. So I also get not removing Robs. If he underperforms for the better part of 2019, I would remove him. I'd just say at that point in time, you gamble on him. I'm not going to. But I wouldn't mind keeping him for now and seeing what happens in a couple of months. And obviously with a new in-game leader, many, many things are possible. This video was kindly supported by Dean Tanglis, Andreas Snazore Westerlund, Gardner Wilson, OllieJ, Tobias Bernasconi, NateDOhDoubleG, James Harding, Kyla Harris, Travis Greb, Daniel Yordanov, Tristan Jones, and a special thanks goes out to Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for upcoming content of mine? Perhaps you'd like to ask me a question for my monthly video AMA. Do you want some teasers to see who the next guests are for my talk shows, for my interviews? Maybe you'd like to take part in a monthly esports discussion with yours truly. Well, put your money where your mouth is at the Patreon link in the description box below and join the Scrilluminati today.